Early in the morning, when the sky was still pale and the streets were quiet, Auntie Beezy walked toward the bus station with her usual calm steps. She liked starting work before the rush. At that hour, the station felt peaceful. The shops were closed, the buses were silent, and the cleaners were usually the only ones awake. She carried her bucket and mop, humming a simple tune she had known since childhood. Cleaning was not glamorous work, but she did it with pride. She liked the feeling of bringing order to a messy world. She entered the ladies' restroom as she always did, pushing the door open gently so it wouldn't bang against the wall. The air smelled of floor polish from the previous night's cleaning, and a soft light from the small overhead bulb made the room look dull but familiar. She rolled up her sleeves and prepared to begin her routine. She started wiping the sinks, checking the mirrors, and sweeping the small bits of dust on the ground. Everything seemed normal. Then she heard it. A very soft, very light sound. At first it was so faint she wasn't even sure it was real. It sounded almost like a breath or a whisper or maybe the small cry of an animal. She paused, listening. It happened again, barely a sound at all, but something was definitely there. She tilted her head, trying to hear clearly. Her first thought was that it was a stray cat. Sometimes cats wandered into the station at night looking for warmth. She had chased more than one out of the restroom before. She moved a little closer to the stalls, her heart beating a little faster. The sound seemed to be coming from the last stall, the one that always had a loose latch. She sighed softly. If it was a cat, she hoped it would not try to scratch her. She pushed the stall door gently with the back of her hand. The hinge made a small squeak, and for a moment she only saw the dull gray tiles of the floor. Everything looked normal. But then she saw something near the corner of the stall, something wrapped in a thin cloth. It was such a small bundle that for a moment she still thought it was a cat curled up. Then the bundle moved. Not like an animal. Not a sudden jump or sharp twitch. It moved gently, slowly, with the trembling motion of something fragile. Beezy leaned forward, her breath catching in her chest. She did not want to assume anything too quickly. She squatted down, her knees cracking as she lowered herself closer to the floor. When she peeled back a small fold of the cloth, her eyes widened in shock. It was a baby. A newborn. So tiny, so fragile, so still except for the slight movement of its chest. The cloth wrapped around it was thin and not warm enough. One small hand poked out from the edge of the fabric. A tiny hand with fingers barely the size of a grain of corn. Beezy felt her heart twist. She had seen many things while working at the station, but nothing like this. This was not a place where a baby should ever be left alone. For a moment she froze. She did not scream. She did not panic. Instead, she felt a deep, heavy sadness settle on her shoulders. Whoever had left this child must have been scared, lost, or overwhelmed. But she also felt an urgent alarm inside her. The baby needed help, and every second mattered. She reached out carefully as though touching something made of glass. The baby let out another tiny whimper, weaker this time. It broke her heart. She forced herself to act quickly. She stood up, almost stumbling, and ran out of the restroom faster than she ever had in her life. Her legs felt heavy, but she pushed herself toward the security office near the entrance of the station. She knocked hard on the door until the guard inside, a sleepy-looking man named Musa, opened it. "There is a baby in the restroom," she said, her voice shaking. "A newborn. Very small. Someone left the child there." Musa blinked, confused at first. Then his eyes grew wide. He grabbed his radio and called for immediate help, his voice sharp and urgent. Beezy hurried back to the restroom with him, afraid the baby might stop moving if she took too long. By the time they reached the stall again, Musa had already called for medical assistance. Beezy knelt beside the tiny child again, watching closely, afraid to touch the baby without proper care. Musa stood behind her, unsure of what to do but ready to help however he could. They both stayed as close as possible without disturbing the fragile child. The station felt different now, no longer peaceful. It felt like time had slowed down, like everything in the world had paused to focus on that tiny life in the corner of the restroom. Within minutes, they heard footsteps rushing toward them. Paramedic Kola arrived with his small medical bag, breathing fast but staying calm. He entered the stall carefully, his eyes softening when he saw the infant. He spoke with quiet urgency as he checked the baby's breathing, wrapped the child in a thicker blanket, and lifted the baby gently into his arms. While he worked, Beezy watched with trembling hands. She felt a mix of relief and fear, relief that help had arrived, fear that the baby might be too weak. Kola reassured her softly that they would do everything possible. He told Musa to clear the hallway, and then he hurried out of the restroom with the baby held close to his chest. Beezy followed him out of the restroom but stopped at the entrance of the station as the ambulance doors closed. She stood still for a long time, her hands pressed together, her breathing slow and shaky. She hoped with all her heart that the tiny child would survive. She also wondered about the mother, where she was, what fear had driven her to leave her baby behind, and whether she was safe. The morning sun had risen now, and people were beginning to arrive at the station. They walked past her without knowing what had happened, without knowing that a life had almost been lost in the quiet early hours. Beezy felt a strange mix of exhaustion and determination. She knew she would never forget this morning. She also knew that something inside her had changed. Sometimes life placed unexpected things in one's path, and all a person could do was respond with courage and compassion. She wiped her eyes with the edge of her sleeve and took a deep breath. Work still needed to be done. But she carried the image of that tiny hand in her heart as she returned to the restroom, her steps slow and thoughtful. She no longer felt like she was simply cleaning a room. She felt like she was standing in a place where something fragile had been saved. And that, she knew, was something that mattered. Within minutes, paramedic Kola and his team arrived at the bus station, moving with quick steps and focused eyes. The early morning air was still cool, and the station was just beginning to stir with life. But everything felt different now. The quiet calm had turned into a soft wave of worry. People sensed that something unusual was happening, even if they did not yet know what it was. Kola entered the ladies' restroom with two other paramedics, both carrying small medical bags. Auntie Beezy stepped aside to give them space, wiping her hands on her apron even though they were already clean. Her heart was still beating fast. She watched as Kola knelt beside the tiny newborn, his face softening with concern. He spoke gently to his team, giving instructions in a calm voice, even though the situation was delicate. The baby looked so small in the thin cloth, almost too small to be real. Kola reached out with steady hands, checking the child's breathing, the movement of the chest, the softness of the skin. The baby's breathing was there, but it was faint, like a candle flame struggling against wind. Kola could feel how fragile the little body was. His voice lowered as he told his team the child needed immediate warmth and medical care. One of the paramedics handed him a soft emergency blanket, the kind that trapped heat and protected weak bodies. Kola wrapped the newborn carefully, making sure every part was covered except for the tiny face. Even then, the baby's skin looked pale and cold. The weak whimper the child gave made Auntie Beezy press her hand against her chest. Kola stood up slowly, holding the baby close to his chest to keep the little body warm. He nodded to his team, and together they moved quickly but gently out of the restroom. A few early travelers were entering the station by then. Their footsteps stopped. Their eyes widened. They whispered among themselves, unsure of what they were seeing. People in the station rarely saw something like this. They could tell something serious was happening, and confusion spread from one person to another like a quiet wave. Musa, the security guard, moved ahead of the paramedics, shouting for people to step back and make space. His voice echoed across the hall, stronger than usual. People obeyed immediately, forming a narrow path as the paramedic team rushed through. Some covered their mouths in shock. Others placed their hands on their chests, saying small prayers under their breath. A few even reached out as if wanting to help but not knowing how. Kola kept his eyes forward, his arms holding the baby with the steady care of someone who knew there was no time to waste. Every second mattered. He could feel how light the newborn was, far too light. His mind raced with possibilities: premature birth, lack of warmth, risk of infection, low breathing. He knew the child needed an incubator, oxygen, and constant monitoring. A bus station floor was no place for such a tiny life. His team followed him closely, carrying medical bags and moving with long, quick steps. They reached the entrance of the station where the ambulance was waiting, its back doors open, lights quietly flashing. The siren was off for now, but everyone knew it would soon be blaring through the streets. Kola climbed into the back of the ambulance and placed the baby gently onto a small padded stretcher. The child looked even smaller under the bright white interior light. Another paramedic began checking the baby's temperature and preparing a tiny oxygen mask. The numbers worried them. The child's body was too cold, too weak, and it was clear the baby had entered the world much earlier than expected. But there was still hope. There was still a chance if they acted fast enough. Outside, a small crowd had gathered. People whispered in low voices, trying to guess what had happened. Some believed it must have been a mother in trouble. Others thought perhaps the birth had come unexpectedly. A few shook their heads in disbelief, wondering how anyone could leave a newborn alone. But no one truly knew the story. They only knew that something heartbreaking had taken place in a corner of their busy, noisy station. Auntie Beezy stood a few steps away from the ambulance, her arms wrapped around herself. She felt a mixture of fear, sadness, and relief. She had never expected to start her morning like this. She had never expected to find a newborn fighting for life in a restroom stall. She could not stop thinking about the tiny hand she had seen earlier. She wondered how much pain or confusion the mother must have felt to leave such a small child behind. At the same time, she felt proud that she had acted quickly, proud that she had saved the child from being alone in the cold. Kola stepped out of the ambulance for a moment and walked toward her. His eyes were tired but grateful. "You did well," he said in a quiet voice. "If you had not found the baby when you did, things could have been worse." Beezy nodded, but she did not trust herself to speak. Her eyes felt hot and she swallowed hard. All she wanted was for the baby to survive. She asked softly, "Will the child be okay?" Kola hesitated only for a second. "We will do everything we can. The baby has a chance. A small chance but a real one." Beezy closed her eyes for a moment and breathed deeply. She wanted to believe that. She needed to believe that. She opened her eyes just in time to see the paramedic team finishing their preparations inside the ambulance. Musa stood beside her now, arms crossed tightly. He was usually a strong and quiet man, but even he looked shaken. "This world," he muttered softly, "you think you have seen everything, then something like this happens." Both of them watched as Kola climbed back into the ambulance. The doors closed. The engine roared to life. The siren began to wail through the morning air, loud and sharp, cutting through the whispers of the growing crowd. People stepped aside as the ambulance sped away, turning onto the main road and disappearing into the traffic. The station slowly returned to its routine, but the atmosphere felt heavy. The whispers did not stop. Travelers who had witnessed the scene carried the story from one corner of the station to another. Some described the baby as tiny as a bird. Others said they had never seen a paramedic move so fast. Everyone felt the weight of the moment. As for Auntie Beezy, she walked back into the ladies' restroom, her feet slow and her thoughts full. She looked at the empty stall where she had found the baby. The thin cloth was gone now. Only the clean floor remained. But to her it no longer looked like an ordinary stall. It felt like the place where a life had almost slipped away but didn't, because she had been there, because she had listened, because she had cared. She continued her cleaning, but her hands moved more gently than usual. The memory of the baby stayed with her, warm and alive in her mind. She whispered a small prayer as she worked, a quiet wish that wherever the ambulance was headed, hope was waiting there too. At the hospital, the newborn was taken straight to the special care unit. Doctors worked quietly around the tiny baby, giving oxygen, checking temperature, and placing the child in a warm incubator. Nurses moved softly, speaking in low voices so they would not disturb the baby's fragile breathing. The room felt tense but hopeful. Every beep of the machines felt important. Every small movement of the baby meant something. Outside the room, the echo of the ambulance siren slowly faded, leaving only the quiet hum of hospital life. While the medical team focused on saving the child, another team gathered in a small office down the hall. It was a simple room with a desk, a computer, and a few chairs. A soft overhead light flickered slightly, making the room feel colder than it was. Social worker Tammy and Officer Jide sat beside each other, watching a screen that showed security footage from the bus station. A hospital staff member stood near the door, ready to help if they needed anything. Tammy leaned forward with a serious look on her face. She cared deeply about children and had seen many painful stories in her work, but this case felt different. It felt urgent. It felt heavy. She pressed a button on the computer and the video started playing. The footage was from early that morning. They watched people walk in and out of the station. Most looked normal. Travelers carrying bags, cleaners pushing carts, guards walking slowly around. Then they saw her. A young girl, slim and small, wearing an oversized sweater and holding her stomach as if in discomfort. Her steps were slow and shaky. Her eyes darted around nervously, as if she was afraid someone might recognize her. She kept pulling her sweater down, trying to hide something. The name tag on the screen marked the time, very early, long before most people arrived. "That must be her," Officer Jide said quietly. His voice was deep but gentle. He was not looking for a criminal. He was looking for someone who needed help. Tammy nodded. She looked scared. Very scared. They watched as the girl, Amara, moved toward the ladies' restroom. She paused at the door, holding the wall for support. Her face was pale. Then she entered, disappearing from the camera's view. The footage continued to play. Nearly 20 minutes passed before Amara came out again. This time she walked faster, her head down, almost running as she left through the back entrance of the station. Tammy paused the video. She stared at the girl's face, frozen on the screen. Amara looked so young, so lost. She looked like someone who had been carrying a heavy secret alone for a long time. She must have been in trouble, Tammy said softly. Something terrified her. Officer Jide crossed his arms. He had dealt with difficult cases before, but he felt something different this time. He could see the fear in the girl's eyes, even through a blurry camera screen. "We need to find her," he said. "But gently. No pressure. She is not a danger. She needs help." The hospital staff member nodded and added, "We also need medical information. The baby is premature. The doctors need to know if the mother had any health problems." Tammy agreed. "We will handle this with care." They printed a clear still image from the video, Amara standing near the restroom door. Her face was tired, her hair messy, her sweater stretched and old. She did not look like someone who wanted to hurt anyone. She looked like someone who had nowhere to go. With the photo in hand, Tammy and Officer Jide left the hospital and headed toward the station. When they arrived, the morning rush had begun. Buses honked, people hurried around, sellers shouted the prices of snacks and water bottles. But even in all the noise, the restroom area felt different. It felt heavy, like something important had taken place there. They met with Musa and Auntie Beezy again. The two had been talking quietly, still shaken from the morning events. When they saw the printed photo, Auntie Beezy gasped softly. "Yes," she whispered. "She came here. She looked so tired. So lost. I thought she was just sick." Tammy asked carefully, "Did she speak to anyone? Did she ask for help?" Beezy shook her head slowly. "No. She did not say a single word. She just walked in, and later walked out quickly." Officer Jide questioned Musa next. "Do you remember seeing her before she left?" Musa scratched his chin, trying to recall every moment. "I saw someone, yes. She was holding her stomach like she was in pain. She walked fast. She looked like she was afraid someone would stop her." "Did she talk to anyone?" Tammy asked. "No," Musa replied. She kept her head down. The group fell silent. They needed more information. Tammy decided to walk around the station, showing the photo to a few shop workers and cleaners. Some shook their heads, saying they had never seen the girl before. Others said they noticed someone moving quickly but didn't pay attention. A fruit seller pointed toward the road outside the station. "I saw her cross there," he said. "She did not look well." That small detail was enough for Tammy and Jide to continue their search outside. They walked along the street, asking people gently if they had seen the girl. They approached a woman selling breakfast. She remembered someone who fit the description. "Yes, she stopped here for a moment," the woman said. "She looked like she wanted to ask for something, but she changed her mind. Then she kept walking toward the old houses near the market." That gave them a direction, one step closer to finding the girl. Back at the hospital, the baby remained in the incubator, tiny chest rising and falling in slow, fragile breaths. Nurses checked the machines often, adjusting settings to keep the baby warm and stable. Each moment felt important. Meanwhile, Tammy and Officer Jide moved through narrow streets, showing the photo to neighbors. Some recognized her, saying she lived somewhere in that area. Others said she had kept mostly to herself. A teenage girl pointed toward a row of old buildings and said quietly, "I think she stays there. She doesn't talk to people much. She always looks sad." Tammy thanked her and followed the direction. Her heart felt heavy but focused. She hoped they would find Amara safe. She hoped the girl would not run away again. She hoped the mother would know her baby was still alive. As they walked, the sun climbed higher, warming the dusty streets. People opened windows, swept their doorsteps, and prepared for the day. But for Tammy and Jide, the morning was not about routine. It was about understanding. It was about compassion. They were getting closer to finding a girl who had carried a burden too heavy for her young shoulders. They soon reached the old buildings, a quiet row of small rooms with cracked walls and faded paint. Somewhere among them, a frightened girl was hiding, believing she had no one to turn to. But she was not alone anymore. The search was no longer just about finding a mother. It was about giving her a chance to speak, a chance to be heard, and a chance to face her fear with someone by her side. And that search had only just begun. Amara was found 2 days later, but those 2 days felt long and heavy for everyone searching. Social worker Tammy and Officer Jide had walked through many streets, spoken to many people, and checked places where a frightened young girl might hide. Each time they thought they were close, the trail grew cold again. But they did not give up. They knew fear could make someone disappear easily. They also knew fear was not something to chase with force but something to approach with patience. When they finally found her, she was sitting behind an old building near the market. The place was quiet, hidden between walls where people rarely walked. Amara was curled up against the wall, her arms wrapped around her knees, her sweater pulled tight around her thin body. Her head rested on her arms and her hair fell across her face. She looked so small, as if she wanted to disappear into the shadows. Tammy approached slowly, careful not to frighten her. "Amara?" she said gently. The girl lifted her head. Her eyes were red from crying, and her lips trembled. For a moment she looked like she might run. Her fingers dug into her sleeves. Her shoulders shook slightly. "It's okay," Tammy said softly. "We're not here to hurt you. We only want to talk." Officer Jide stood a few steps behind her, keeping his voice calm and steady. "You are not in trouble," he added. "You are safe." Those words seemed to make Amara freeze. Safe. It was a word she had not felt in a long time. She blinked slowly, as though trying to understand whether she could trust what they were saying. Tammy moved closer, kneeling down so she was on the same level as the girl. "We know you've been through something very difficult. We're here to help you, not to punish you." At the word help, Amara's eyes filled with tears again. She lowered her head and covered her face with her hands. Her whole body shook. Tammy waited patiently, giving her time to breathe. After a moment, Amara lifted her head and wiped her cheeks, though the tears kept coming. "I didn't mean to leave," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know what to do." Tammy nodded slowly, gently. "Can you tell us what happened?" "Only if you feel ready." Amara took a long, trembling breath. Her fingers tugged at the edge of her sweater, twisting the fabric as she tried to find the courage to speak. Her voice was small and weak, but she forced herself to continue. "I hid everything," she said. "I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother. Not my aunt. Not my friends. Nobody." She paused as if expecting them to judge her, but they waited quietly, giving her space. "I was scared," she continued. "Scared of what people would say. Scared of how my family would look at me. They always told me to be careful, to be responsible, to make them proud. But I made a mistake, and I was too afraid to say anything." Her voice broke at the last words. She covered her mouth, trying to stop the sobs, but they came anyway. Tammy moved a little closer. "You were carrying this alone," she said gently. "That must have felt very heavy." Amara nodded, tears falling again. "I tried to pretend everything was normal. I wore big clothes. I avoided people. I stayed in my room a lot. I thought I could hide it until I figured out what to do. But I never figured anything out. I just stayed scared." She looked down at her shaking hands. "Then 2 days ago, when I was at the bus station, something happened. I felt pain. Strong pain. I didn't know what was happening to me. My legs felt weak. My stomach hurt. I thought I was sick." Tammy listened quietly, her face soft with understanding. "I went into the restroom because I didn't know where else to go. I was so afraid," Amara continued. "Everything happened so fast. Too fast. I didn't know who to call. I didn't know what to do. I thought I was going to die." Her voice trembled again and she pressed her palms against her face. "I didn't understand what was happening," she whispered. "I didn't know it would be that way. I didn't know it would happen at the station." She paused, swallowing hard. "When it was over, the baby wasn't moving much. The baby was so small. Too small. I thought the baby wouldn't survive. I thought I had done something wrong." She shook her head, her shoulders trembling. "I panicked. I couldn't think. I was scared someone would come in and scream at me. I was scared my family would find out. I thought maybe someone else, someone smarter, someone stronger, could help the baby better than me." A fresh wave of tears ran down her cheeks. "So I ran," she whispered. "I ran because I thought the baby was gone. And I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to face what I had done. I just wanted to stop feeling so scared." Tammy reached out slowly and placed a gentle hand on Amara's shoulder. The girl flinched at first, but then she relaxed slightly. It had been a long time since anyone had touched her with kindness. "Amara," Tammy said softly, "fear makes people do things they never planned. But listen to me carefully." Tammy paused, letting each word be clear. "Your baby is alive." Amara's head snapped up. "Alive?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Yes," Tammy said. "The baby is at the hospital. The baby is small, but the doctors are taking care of everything." Amara's mouth fell open. Her eyes widened, filling with a different kind of emotion. Shock, confusion, hope, fear all mixed together. I thought," she pressed a hand to her chest as if trying to steady her heartbeat. I thought the baby, no. I didn't think. Tammy nodded gently. You didn't know. You were afraid. But your baby is fighting. And you can see the baby when you're ready. Amara's face crumpled. She let out a soft cry, not of fear this time, but of relief mixed with guilt. Her body shook as she leaned forward, covering her face again. Officer Jide looked away politely, giving her privacy as she cried. Tammy stayed beside her, one hand on her back, steady and warm. After several minutes, when Amara finally lifted her head again, her voice was barely above a whisper. Will they let me see the baby?" she asked. "Yes," Tammy said. "But first we need to take you to the hospital. You need care too. You've been through something very hard and your body needs attention." Amara nodded slowly, though fear still lingered in her eyes. "What about my family?" she asked weakly. "We will talk to them," Tammy said. "But only when you are ready. You won't face anything alone." Those words made Amara look up again. For the first time, there was a small spark of trust in her eyes, small, fragile, but real. Tammy helped her stand. Amara's legs trembled, but she did not run this time. She did not hide. She allowed herself to be guided. As they walked toward the main road, she whispered one more question. Is the baby really alive?" Tammy smiled softly. "Yes. And the baby is waiting for you." For the first time in 2 days, Amara let out a slow breath, one that carried both pain and hope. She did not know what the future would bring, but she knew one thing now. She was not alone anymore. Ao grew stronger day by day, and each small improvement felt like a miracle. The nurses at the hospital loved talking about how brave the tiny baby was. They called Ao the small fighter, because even though the child was born too early and too weak, there was a gentle strength that showed in every breath. The incubator kept the baby warm, and the soft hum of the machines became a steady rhythm in the room. Every morning the nurses checked Ao's heartbeat, breathing, and temperature. They spoke softly around the incubator, as if loud voices might scare the little one. They always smiled when Ao moved even a little. A small hand stretching, a tiny foot kicking, a weak cry, every little act meant hope. Amara was in another room recovering, both physically and emotionally. She was still weak, still tired, and still scared, but she was receiving the help she had needed for a long time. Social worker Tammy visited her daily. Sometimes they talked for a long time. Other times they sat in silence, and Tammy simply stayed by her side so she wouldn't feel alone. Amara had spent months hiding her pain and fear. Now she slowly learned that she could talk about them. She could tell someone when she hurt. She could ask for help. She could be honest without being judged. During her counseling sessions, Amara learned that fear becomes heavier when it is carried alone. Her counselor helped her understand why she had panicked at the station, why she had run, and why she had felt helpless. They talked about secrets, shame, expectations, and struggles that many young girls in her situation faced. Slowly, Amara began to see that she was not the only one who had ever felt this way. She was not strange. She was not broken. She was just a girl who had been overwhelmed by something too big for her to face alone. Every time she asked about Ao, the nurses brought warm news. Ao's breathing is getting better, they would say. Ao cried today. Ao opened the eyes this morning. Ao is stronger than yesterday. The first day they told Amara she could see the baby, she almost froze. She stood outside the special care room, her feet heavy, her hands shaking. She didn't know what she would feel. She didn't know if the baby would accept her. She didn't know if she deserved to be there. Tammy stood beside her, patient as always, and whispered, "You can take your time." Amara finally whispered back, "I'm scared." "That is normal," Tammy said softly. "But love grows even in fear." Amara took a slow breath and stepped inside the room. The soft lights made everything look gentle. The nurses greeted her kindly and led her to the incubator. When she looked inside and saw Ao's tiny face, her breath caught in her throat. She felt her chest tighten. She brought her hands to her mouth, tears rising in her eyes. The baby looked so peaceful, so innocent, so unaware of the world outside. Amara felt both love and guilt wash over her in one strong wave. "That's your baby," a nurse said warmly. "A strong one." Amara reached out but stopped, afraid her touch might be too much. The nurse encouraged her softly. "You can touch the hand. Very gentle." So she did. Her fingertip brushed Ao's tiny fingers, and the baby's hand curled slightly. It was the smallest movement, but it felt like a world-changing moment. Tears rolled down Amara's cheeks. She whispered, "I am so sorry, so sorry." She said it again and again, her voice breaking each time. She wasn't sure if Ao could hear her, but she hoped the baby could feel her love. From that day onward, Amara visited the special care unit every morning and every evening. She would sit beside the incubator, talking softly or humming little songs she remembered from childhood. Sometimes she cried quietly. Sometimes she smiled. Sometimes she simply watched Ao breathe, just happy to be near. The nurses guided her gently, showing her how to wash her hands properly, how to touch the baby safely, how to understand the monitors. Amara listened carefully, grateful for every lesson. She wanted to learn. She wanted to do things right. Social services helped her apply for support programs. She was given a safe place to stay, health checkups, proper food, and counseling. Tammy made sure she attended all sessions. The hospital staff made sure she had everything she needed to heal. Little by little, Amara began to change. Her shoulders were not always tense. Her eyes slowly regained light. Her voice grew steadier. She began to ask questions, to laugh a little, to talk about the future. She no longer felt like she was walking through life alone. Auntie Beezy visited often. She never expected to be part of such a story. She came with gifts, soft blankets, baby socks, tiny hats, nothing expensive but all given with pure love. When she saw Ao for the first time, her eyes filled with joy. She whispered a small prayer and thanked the heavens that she had heard the baby that morning. She told Amara gently, "You are stronger than you think. And this child is a blessing." Each visit from Beezy made Amara feel supported. She realized there were kind people in the world, people who cared without asking for anything in return. Time passed and Ao continued to grow. The baby's breathing improved. The skin became warmer. The small cries grew louder and stronger. Nurses celebrated every milestone. When Ao gained weight, they clapped softly. When the baby opened the eyes longer, they smiled proudly. When the baby's grip grew stronger, they cheered in quiet excitement. One morning, the doctor told Amara something she had been dreaming of hearing. Ao is strong enough now. Soon, the baby will no longer need the incubator. Amara gasped softly and covered her mouth. It felt unreal. She had feared for her child's life. Now she heard that the baby was improving. Hope burned gently in her heart. She nodded again and again, unable to stop smiling. As days went by, Ao moved from the incubator to a small hospital cot. Amara learned how to hold the baby safely. The first time she carried Ao in her arms, she felt a warmth spread through her entire body. It was love, pure, overwhelming, powerful love. She whispered, "I am here. I won't run again." Tammy saw the change. She saw a young girl becoming a young mother. She saw fear turning into responsibility. She saw shame turning into courage. And she felt proud. The day Amara was finally allowed to take Ao home was filled with soft tears and warm smiles. Nurses hugged her. Beezy prayed for her. The doctor gave her careful instructions. As Amara stepped outside the hospital with Ao in her arms, the sun touched her face gently. She felt new. She felt stronger. She felt like life had given her a second chance. What had begun with fear became a story about healing and beginning again. Amara held Ao close and whispered, "We will be okay." And for the first time she truly believed it.